Hello and welcome back to a new Italian P&C video on the world beyond the ice walls. This is the second series we're doing on the world beyond the ice walls, and this is the 13th episode of this series. Welcome back once again to this beautiful and interesting world showed by this amazing map that goes to explore the world beyond the ice walls. Well, we've seen the one behind the ice walls, that's where we live in, right? Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia, the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and so on and so forth. Then there's Antarctica, which in this map is the ice wall, as many call it. And as shown in this map, there's the Sentinel's Gate, the Leviathan's Gate, the Tiger's Gate, the Serpent's Gate, and in these gates that are heavily protected, you can actually access the world beyond the ice walls. But this is not the first series we're doing on the world beyond the ice walls. In fact, this is the second entry to the series. In the first, we explored what was in the first ring we're looking at right now that was beyond the ice walls. But in the second series, we're looking at the second ring outside of the mountain ring, which is another layer, another ring that separates you could really call them two different worlds, honestly. And well, in the first one, there was like a lot of geopolitical history regarding who got to what first, and who went where, and who established what state and whatever where in the first ring. The second map is way devoid of lore, so I have to look up things and like try connecting the dots, both from the creators of the map, what happens like based on like the names of the continents, and a lot of other things. So we're back at it again with this beautiful map. And we have done a really big journey. We've done a really long and hard journey that started here in Weldrum. This was the first place we ever discovered in this map, and we looked at all the places from there on out, all the way, doing a circle, and now we're here. We're at New Taured and Atlantis, and the Sunken Wastes. That's what we're gonna do in this episode. So, the wastes, also, what is the wastes? Well, if you don't know what wastes are, we'll get to it. But you can really see them when you zoom out from the map and you actually see, you know, Wolves of Asgard. Well, I guess the Wolves of Asgard and the Titanic Forest is not really wastes, but it's still part of that kind of like deal, right? Irradiated wastes here, frozen wastes there, we have the volcanic wastes there, and finally scorched wastes. So, last episode, what we did was look at all these smaller and less relevant islands. Well, not less relevant, just less interesting, at least in my opinion, in the area in the Torrential Ocean. And while that was very interesting, and that was definitely peculiar, we saw the tallest mountains in the entirety of the second ring, the mountains of Kong. I think it's much more interesting to get to the things we're gonna look into today. So I tried to like let these continents get a single video because I want to focus on them instead of, you know, just doing them among our continents. I guess I could have done a single video on New Taured and one on Atlantis, but they're not really connected in the sense that there's like shared lore between them, as much as I think just going New Taured or Atlantis would just not make for the best video. So we're going all two of them, and of course the Sunken Wastes. So we're getting a freebie basically, alright? A triple. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get started with Atlantis, the sinking empire, and then we'll go into New Taured. So what is Atlantis, and why is it called the sinking empire? First of all, as usual, let's get into geography and what this place actually looks like on the map. So we're already looking at something very interesting, in that it is very different from the most of the continents in this world don't tend to be this destroyed, basically. I don't know if destroyed could really describe what we're looking at, but it's not looking good for the sinking empire. And I think what happens to this place is basically said in the name, or rather the description of it, the sinking empire. It's sinking. And that's why you can really see these original kind of borders that it had before it kind of went into the water, and what it actually looks like now. And it also has, like, I would say, a lack of different biomes. There's no deserts, there's no plains. It just seems to be a lot of like mangroves, a lot of like, well, I would probably say this is a full-on swamp, basically. And then there's a little bit of high-rise territories. You can see it here. We wouldn't really call it a mountain chain, but it's definitely more elevated than the area near the Sunken Wastes. And I think this kind of geographical outlook to Atlantis, the sinking empire, can be really just attested by the fact that it's close to the Sunken Wastes. Also, I just noticed, well, I didn't just notice, but we're not going to talk about it today, but there is a sea that is next to these landmasses, and it's called the Sea of Monsters. So that'll be interesting. That'll be definitely interesting. The Sunken Wastes seem pretty repetitive when it comes to like what it actually looks like. I will zoom in just to show you, but it's basically an endless marshland. That's what it looks, at least from above. It is a bit more interesting when you get into it, but that's basically the outlook of it. You can really see like where the borders between the water, well, the ocean and the land used to be, but then it got like sunk, and then there's all these lakes going everywhere. So, you know, if you look into what Canada looks like, the Great Canadian Shield, as it's commonly referred to, in purely physical map terms, so the earth and the water and, you know, these physical attributes, you can see it's kind of close to it. Also, Siberia looks a lot of like this, but the difference is mainly the lack of lakes. Canada is much more like this. It's just full of lakes. So definitely a very interesting type of geography. So if you're into like looking into that, go for it. But let's get back to what Atlantis, the sinking empire, is, because I'm sure a lot of you will be like, okay, whatever, it's sinking, but like, can we get to the actual lore? Well, yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We're starting right now, okay? So, who actually lives here, right? It was originally settled by the Subnotions, which were a race of people already discussed in previous episodes. You can look back into the previous episode. I'm not going to repeat every time who the Subnotions are. Long story, but you can look into the last episode. I'm gonna link in the description one of the episodes that I talk about them in. And Atlantis became a myth due to the distance between it and the other landmasses and vicinity to the Sunken Wastes. So basically, despite it being actually settled, so there were living beings here, the fact that it was this distant from anywhere else, like look at this. If you think this is not a lot, let's just do like this. Okay, let's just do like this. Okay, let's go from the furthest point to the next landmass, to the closest landmass that is like an actual continent. See this? Doesn't look too bad, right? You can probably live with that. Let's bring this up. Let's bring this up and compare it to the terms that we have here in the world behind the ice walls, right? Because so far, I mean, it's definitely separated, but can you really call it like a lot of distance? Like, can you really separate it as a civilization? Well, yeah, you'll see. So you can really kind of figure it out, like just by going like this. But yeah, it's a lot. This is the equivalent of basically, yeah, it's more than Europe to South America. So we're talking a place that, instead of like, you know, having a bunch of other continents that are near it, have wastes near it, and the only other thing is a bunch of islands. Yeah, this is basically the difference from like Scotland to the Caribbean island, right? So yeah, obviously not the best place when it comes to like being close to other places. So once it was settled, the civilization that sprung up in it really couldn't do anything about it. Like, it was just so distant, so isolated from anywhere else, that it kind of became a myth. The original Atlantis, though, is not this one. This is basically where the big, like, whoa, reveal comes, right? So when you think about Atlantis, you think about something completely different. You think about the one that is talked about in the ancient Greek mythology, or, well, it's not only that, but that's basically the starting point, although there were a lot of civilizations, ancient civilizations, that refer to it. Atlantis is very well known. A lot of people researched for Atlantis everywhere. They were trying to find Atlantis somewhere in the Atlantic Sea, in the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Some thought it was America, some thought it was some island in the Caribbean, some thought it was like the islands here in the Azores, the islands like between Europe and the Americas. And one thing everybody knows is how Atlantis ended, right? Everybody knows the end of Atlantis and why people can't find it. Why people can't find where it was. So the original Atlantis is the one we'll think about. So let's just go hypothetically. And draw where Atlantis might have been. I think it would probably be somewhere like here, maybe, if like the original one, something like that. Maybe it's a bit smaller, maybe, something like that. Maybe it was a little island. For all we know, the description of Atlantis doesn't really say like a size. Also, just so you know, I do have my kind of theory on Atlantis, and it has to do with Mauritania and the Eye of the Sahara. I talked about this in a previous episode in a series that kind of flopped, like it didn't really do that well. Now, very few people actually watched it. So if you're interested in like the whole like ancient civilization, kind of like where we were located, what happened to them, like for example the Bible myth, the Bible flood myth, and the policing of Atlantis, well, you can go back and look at that. But basically there's this theory that says that Atlantis is located in a structure called the Eye of the Sahara, which is a structure in the country of Mauritania. I think it was somewhere like here, not really sure, maybe a bit more like in like near to the coast, something like that, right? And in this area, basically, there's this structure that is basically one-to-one to the description of Plato of Atlantis. So at that point you ask yourself, well, there's this structure that looks exactly like Atlantis. Why are we looking for it in the Atlantic Ocean? We know that the sea levels were different 10,000 years ago. So why look into there where it could have possibly been here? So that's basically where I'm going on with my theories. But let's just say it's in the Atlantic Ocean. Let's just say something like that. I don't know how it looked like. We don't know how it looked like. We just know this, like the main city, how that looked like, the like main settlements. Maybe the continent was like just that settlement. That's why it was very small. But either way, we don't know. So let's try to hypothesize it's somewhere like there, right? And what happens is that it's destroyed, but not before leaving a mark in history where everybody knows about it, everybody has heard about it. People in Greece, people in Egypt, people in the Levant, people in Europe know about it. There's no real sources about like people in the Americas knowing about Atlantis. There's no like myth of like a place eastwards being in this ocean, but you know, maybe they were just too far away. But either way, it left a mark. The idea of Atlantis spread because of reasons. Like there's no collective decision to create this myth of Atlantis. It had different names, has different attributes. The original one is like Greek in nature, but the concept of like a far westland existing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean has been widespreadly believed by many cultures. And that went gone. That was gone, it was gone, there was nowhere to find it, and all we know now is that there's islands in the Atlantic Oceans that at some points in history rose and fell, in the literal sense, right? They were submerged. Some literally disappeared. A big example I made about recently is the island of Hy-Brasil, or Hy-Brasil. I made a video about that one too if you want to watch it, but basically there was this island that most of Europe in the Middle Ages and the Age of Exploration, so we're talking like modern era, right? They were all convinced it existed. They put it on all the maps, right? And despite all this, there's no island now. You can't find it. But then, with modern technology, you could see that there was actual proof of this island existing at a certain point, because the sea levels were so low in a certain spot that was exactly where the island was thought to be located. So that's kind of like what I think happened to Atlantis. If Atlantis wasn't one of these islands, maybe it's just too far down that we can't find it, and nobody wants to explore the Atlantic Ocean because it's, you know, it's an ocean. So with that said, what is going on with this one? Because like, okay, all is fine and dandy with the original Atlantis, but why is there an Atlantis here and it's called the Sinking Empire? After the original Atlantis was destroyed and submerged thousands of years ago, the continent we see on the map was settled in a second ring by the remnants of the original Atlantean civilization. Much later. Obviously we're talking like thousands of years later. It was rebuilt on the Sunken Wastes in a way to resemble the original homeland of the Atlanteans, including the well-known concentric architecture, the one we were talking about with the Eye of Sahara thing earlier. So the issue is, you create a new homeland, right? You somehow get to a place that is so far, and we'll see how they got there. We'll see it later. But you somehow get to this place that is completely different. Your civilization has collapsed. Your island has been sinking for years, probably thousands of years, and you don't know what to do. Where do you settle? You know only one place. You're basically transported there. And where is that place? The Sunken Wastes. Anything wrong with the Sunken Wastes? It's in the name, baby. It sinks. So this Atlantis hasn't gotten much more lucky than the original one. So why is it called the Sinking Empire, you might ask? Well, it's sinking, as I said, The construction of architecture suited for hominids on the lands so close to one of the wastes has been a disaster. Many say bringing the Atlantean civilization to collapse. So we've got one original civilization that sprung on the original Atlantis, and one that now sprung on the Atlantis that exists in a second ring. And yet, not much more luck happened to them. And the island is sinking again, and I guess it's just their location was bad. The location was really, really bad. Why was this location bad? Well, that has to do with the Sunken Wastes. What exactly are the Sunken Wastes? So, they are darker than a normal swamp, but obviously they are kind of like a swamp, just a huge, infinitely big swamp, basically. We don't even know, like, the creators of the map don't even know, for now, what is outside of the wastes. It could be anything, honestly. Could just go on forever. It has deep, vast pools, which have been hypothesized to be inhabited by swamp creatures of enormous sizes. Although this is high hypothesis, I've seen some say that there's nothing here, this is just like empty of life, it's just that bad, you know, it's that bad, but I don't know, I feel like in a place close to the Sea of Monsters, you would kind of expect some of these monsters to get into these places that have been basically sunk. So even if there's no monsters on the mainland, I think the lakes and the waters near them are basically hell when it comes to like all these creatures. Let's not get like just stopped, there's more. There is a grayish mist perpetually in the air of the swamps that makes even breathing harder for humans. Not great for civilization making, huh, Atlanteans? Some say that the regular conformation of the Sunken Wastes denies the possibility of this being a natural formation. And there's even a theory, and this is part of the lore, there's even a theory that says that this is the creation of humans. This is artificial. The Sunken Wastes aren't a natural formation. The reason it's so destroyed, the reason it's just sinking, is because it is the result of basically an anti-terraforming effort, aka a total war just between extremely ancient civilizations that lasted hundreds of years and happened so far into time that it had effects, long-lasting effects on the geology and the geography of the region. We know the wastes can be very, very tricky. They can be very different one from the other, with places like the Tiffinstorm, which is literally just a storm, like a huge storm. Volcanic wastes, they have very different effects. This one has like hallucinogenic effects, depending on the fumes. The frozen wastes, literally just the endless ice. And then we get to a place that seems to be like something that wasn't that bad at a certain point, but it was destroyed by humanity itself. Or at least what came before it. Well, probably what came before it actually, considering these are Subnotions, so you know, not really the exact same thing. Once again, look at the lore, look at the Subnotions, if you don't know what they are. So that's about it when it comes to Atlantis. Now we have to get to how people actually got to Atlantis, because, you know, they were in the world behind the ice walls and then they got into the second ring. There's a big difference, big distance, right? But also we have to get to New Taured, Gone with the Wind. And you can kind of guess what we're talking about just by looking at the description, as most people can guess these places. But I'm here for it. Let's look at the geography. So, first of all, this is not like Atlantis or New Atlantis. It's an archipelago, meaning it's multiple islands instead of a single continent. There's one bigger main island, which is this one, and then there's several other small islands. And by small, I don't really mean that small, like it's not that bad. I'm pretty sure in terms of size, New Taured, yeah, New Taured compares to roughly a bit less than Australia, which is huge. I mean, there's, you know, water inside of it as well, so it's not that big, but you're getting close to it. At that point, it's a continent by itself. So the continent of New Taured is divided into these many islands, as I've said. The main one seems to be pretty mountainous. There's even desertic aspects to this land, and there's forests. There's, I would believe at this point, close to the equator. This is the equator that goes through this this second ring. Probably this part here is more like tropical, you know, more like the Congo forests, jungle. Although there are deserts in the south, so very resembling, you know, the whole Africa kind of like look. Question really is like, just how would human habitation and Taured really look like? Well, we might not know that, but we might know what it might resemble. So, also there's, before I forget, there's rivers in the main continent. There's actually 2 rivers going here from the like main mountain chain, and then a couple other ones, minor ones, coming from this mountain chain right here. Seems like the moisture is stopped by this kind of like smaller mountain chain right here, and that's why one part here is completely tropical. Well, not tropical, just, you know, like jungle-like, and then this one is just a plains and hills. Very different, very different. Very, very different kind of biomes in this island. Like, for the size of it, compared to places like Horus, impressive, honestly, very impressive. So now let's get into Taured. First of all, let's talk about New Taured, right? Similarly to what we saw in Umurangi, so for those that do not know, Umurangi was a continent we covered a couple, well, not really a couple, a bunch of episodes ago actually. It was called The Lands of the Red Rain, and there's an episode made for it, so, you know, if you want to watch it, once again, link it in the description. But basically in that continent, there was a very specific, mysterious weather phenomenon, and that happens in New Taured as well. And we have seen other effects, like we've mentioned the one of the volcanic wastes, with the hallucinogenic and like toxic, you know, air pollution coming from them. There's more naturally mysterious phenomenon happening in these continents, and one of them has to do with New Taured. In New Taured, the situation is very different though. There are strong winds with paranormal effects, relocating things and living beings from one place to another almost in an instant. It's almost like magic. It's almost like teleportation, like a wormhole, right? We talk about a bunch about wormholes on this channel. So imagine like that, but instead of being like an actual wormhole, it's a bit different. This phenomena can be felt less like being in the middle of a hurricane, which is more like what we saw in the Tiffinstorm, and more like being touched by a gentle breeze. But after that feeling, you are immediately transported into another location. While many think they have changed dimensions altogether after, you know, experiencing all of this, it's actually a location shift from outside the mountain ring, so in the second ring, beyond the ice walls, to the world inside the ice walls. And that's what makes it so weird, because there's, like, we've seen places here where people had to go all the way from the gates, like get to one of the passages. We talked about it, we saw how the map works. But this is different. This is a place that goes from here, well, not really here, you know, but to here in an instant, basically. Almost like a portal. But instead of being a portal, it's an actual natural phenomenon. So my theory is just that it's winds that are so strong that they basically have the same speed of light. But then again, wouldn't light take more time? That's kind of complicated. I don't know either, honestly. This is just like my, like how I researched it and the lore, but it's like scientifically, I don't know how this is proved. If you have any theories, feel free to say so in the comments. But basically what I'm really saying is that the people that went to Atlantis, the sinking empire, the Subnotions that had to live there after the original Atlantis was destroyed, how did they get there? Through this, through the New Taured winds. The winds that transported them right from where they were at, in the Atlantic Ocean, something like that, and all the way to Atlantis. Now the thing is, did they transport them to New Taured? Because the way I read this and I interpret this is that it happens in New Taured, not in nearby places. Otherwise, why would it be like New Taured thing, like New Taured's description? Maybe they appeared in New Taured's, but maybe it was in one of the inhospitable places in New Taured. For example, maybe this area here, something like that, maybe in the jungle, where they thought that the whole continent was just unlivable, and they decided to, you know, go south. But even then, it's like such a big distance. Why would you really make that like kind of like travel? It just, I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe they already found somewhere here. Okay, and there we go. That's where we connect to the other part. So yeah, there is somebody living here, and the way they live is very strangely similar to our world. And the reason for that is that all the humans that live in New Taured live there because they came from the original home, the world behind the ice walls, the inside of the ice walls, right? But because of these winds, they were transported to New Taured, and they, you know, just created a civilization. And this civilization came parallel to human civilization, right? So kind of recent in terms of like geological scale. And now you'll probably be asking, well, what about New Taured has to do with all this stuff? Because you might have heard about Taured, right? The man from Taured? We're gonna get there right now. So Taured, to really understand it, this continent, you kind of have to understand the myth, the legend, or just the theory, the accident that happened behind it. Because this name was decided for a specific reason. Here's how the story starts. In 1959, a man called John Allen Kutcher Zegers flew to Japan with his wife. He spent 3 months in the country before being arrested by the Japanese police for identity fraud. And he registered as a US citizen, but lived in several countries in his life, yet acted as if he wasn't aware that he was breaking any law by being in Japan with these documents. Though the Japanese didn't believe him and thought he might be a spy, so both his wife and him were deported from the country. This was just one of many incidents of people arriving in Japan with weird and mind-boggling documents. So this entire thing seems to be inspired by this specific story, and the entire Man from Taured thing, I researched a bit into it. It appears to be somewhat of like an urban legend. It's not like something like this didn't happen. I'm gonna list some examples, but the type of examples listed don't have a lot of proof behind them. So what I'm asking is this thing actually true? Because I want to be a believer like all of us, but like, are we actually sure this happened? Let's talk about the actual case that everybody knows. Well, not everybody obviously, but a lot of people might know when it comes to Taured. Several years before the event we talked about happens, we have the case of the Man from Taured. Apparently, a man with a passport claiming he was from a country called Taured was stopped by a Japanese guard at an airport in Japan. When asked what Taured was and where it was located on a map, he pointed at a land between France and Spain, close to the small state of Andorra. Yet he claimed he had never been in Andorra, and that the region was part of Taured. The guards locked him into a hotel so he could be interrogated by the police the day later. Yet when the guards came in his room and checked on him, the morning of the next day, he had vanished without a trace. So this is basically where the legends and like the theorizing starts. How did a man flew to Japan with documents that showed a fake country, or at least what was believed to be a fake country, and when actually apprehended and, arrested and, even guarded by people in the hotel he was put in, how did he just disappear? Because this is not like a guy that just made himself disappear. Like, how could he even possibly do it? Why would he do it? What tech did he have to do it? These are all fair questions to ask, but the real question is, what? Andorra? That's what really gets me. Because, okay, how would you confuse where you're from and think it's somewhere here? This region has a very specifically shaped outline. I guess if you're not big on geography and you're ignorant and you're not like the guy that knows everything, you could confuse it for somewhere else. And I'm looking at the map of New Taured, and I don't know, can you really, I guess you could really just think this is the area, or like this, but there's no like close, maybe something like that, I don't know, it's just so weird. Like, if this is the place he came from, why could he not recognize, why do you think this was the place he was from, geographically wise? It's weird, it's definitely weird. And there's another story. Well, there's multiple actually. There's another one again, but the one that I'm not gonna mention is one that has less to do with Taured and more probably with a misspelling of a certain word, a certain ethnic denonym. So there's another example, as I was saying, where basically a person claimed to be from Taured when he was arrested in Japan in 1954, so even earlier. But instead of a European-like country, he said it was from Mauritania to Sudan in Africa, so all the way in Africa, and that he was trying to buy weapons for the Arab Legion. What? But instead of believing him, the Japanese police threw him into a psychiatric hospital. Like, they thought he was crazy. They thought, like, what are you talking about? Now, this could be multiple things, okay? This could either be one, this guy was from New Taured, so outside of the ice walls. He had this, wind effect phenomena that happens in Taured and vice versa. And he probably was like from this desertic region right here. Thought that was like Africa, maybe it looked like it from his way. And when he was transported all the way to Japan, this happened, and he thought, this is my region, this is where I'm from, and I'm buying. Okay, what is up with I'm buying weapons for the Arab Legion? Like, do Arabs exist in New Taured? Has enough Arabs gotten like basically raptured by the wind of Taured that there's like an Arab nation in Taured, or we're just confused by what they were saying? Like maybe he wasn't saying Arab, he was saying like Arab or something like that, like a completely different thing. I don't know. But my theory is a bit less fun. My theory is that they were misspelling the word Tuareg. Instead of saying Taured, they were trying to say Tuareg. And the Tuareg people, while not being that far widespread, are part of a group that are that widespread. Basically the native inhabitants of the Sahara, you could really say. And that kind of does, show up with these kind of borders. So basically from Mauritania in the west to Sudan in the east. And them buying weapons for the Arab League would make sense to a certain extent, kind of, I guess. Even if the Tuareg themselves aren't Arab. But I don't know. It might just be someone from New Taured. I don't know. But anyways, it's an interesting one. It's definitely an interesting one. Because just think of what this means. Like, if there's an Arab nation in New Taured, does this mean it's like a little like extra dimension? Like instead of being like a secondary dimension, it's like they recreated like a certain like smaller version of Earth within. Like they think this is Earth. They think this is Earth. Like this is what, North America. This is like Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, Greenland. I don't know, but it's interesting because then like there's like the same cultures that exist on Earth as in like the world behind the SOLs exist even here. It's an interesting thought experiment, for sure. And that's basically where I'll end with this video. So, New Taured, Gone with the Wind, and Atlantis, the Sinking Empire, and finally the Sunken Wastes. These were very, very interesting. I knew about New Taured a little bit, but I hadn't researched it as much as today. I really had to deep dive this time, because I did not know a lot of these examples. And it honestly kind of like ruined the myth for me, because I thought there were like more sources to it. Like I thought this was like a reputable fact about New Taured. Well, not New Taured, like the original Taured, but maybe I was just confused. Maybe it does exist, and maybe New Taured is basically the same thing with Atlantis, the Sinking Empire. Well, the original civilization is gone. This is like the second version of it, right? As for Atlantis, makes sense. If they were trying to leave and they were like transported to somewhere, still don't understand how they got here from there, but who knows? And finally, the Sunken Wastes. Could it really be artificial? It's up to you to choose. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to subscribe to the channel and support the video, you can like it and give a comment. And we will see each other in the next episode. See you.